Welcome to the Chief Future Officer podcast. I'm your guest, Indus Khaitan. Today, my guest is Janelle Gorman. She's a CFO at York IE, a strategic growth and investment firm. She has over 10 years of experience in the financial industry. Janelle, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat today.
I was looking at your bio. It was pretty amazing in terms of your career growth, and I saw that you write quite a bit on burn rate, budgeting, runway, forecasting. I'm trying to remember other themes. How did that writing begin?
Yeah, that's those are my favorite topics. So the writing kind of began, I guess, as part of what we're doing here at York IE, and I know we'll talk about that a bit more, but um, I have always kind of had, I guess, maybe a passion or a hobby for sharing what I know. I thought for a while I might become a teacher, a leader of sorts. I think from like my earliest report cards, it was like Janelle sure does talk a lot and loves when people listen. And here at York IE, which we'll talk about more, we're really trying to be a startup helping startups. I've learned so many lessons kind of the hard way, and um, whatever wisdom I can share with other folks, I'm happy to. So one of the folks on our team was like, "Hey, why don't you start writing some of this stuff down? You talk to people every day and share insights and give templates and feedback. Why don't you just kind of bundle it up and share it to the broader audience?" So LinkedIn has been a nice way to do that, and also the blog posts that we're doing. So a little bit of my own passion, my own chatterbox ways, and then some encouragement here from our content folks at York IE to put it down in writing, and it's been fun.
Has it evolved, or you wrote in a specific way and you still are at that level?
Um, well, everything evolves naturally in some way. I think the evolution almost has been like in retrograde a bit. When I first started writing, I was like, oh gosh, I need to have something to say, like here are the 7 steps to this or that or the other thing. And really felt like it needed to be very punchy and researched. And I find that some of my most popular blogs or posts are actually what kind of just rolls off my brain of like, oh, has anybody thought about this today? Or this came up in conversation. I've always thought about it this way. I'll just kind of like write something quick. So it's almost devolved into something a little bit more consumable, I think, and relatable.
Isn't this amazing that our audience or whosoever is the reader always wants to see what's inside versus what you're presenting?
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and I feel more and more people are able to gauge that, hey, you've spent quite a bit of time polishing it, tell me what's real.
Totally. Especially in startups, and high growth companies. We don't have time for the shiny polish. And people are like, can you please help me? I have, my AR is out of control and I need to get cash in the door. Can you just give me like a few pointers to do that? Rather than some super academic scholarly write up about, what the best ratios are to use to analyze your AR trends. It's like, can you give me a few pointers to actually connect with my clients and get them to pay? That's what people really need to hear. And the niceties are great, but a little bit unpolished is maybe easier to apply.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. You mentioned about York IE. Would you mind telling us, what does York IE do? How does it help its customers?
Oh, yeah, I'd love to. So, Yorkai is a vertically integrated strategic investment and advisory firm, which is a bit of a mouthful, right? That's the polished answer. So, let's like just kind of give it to you straight here. So, we are a firm, we're kind of a non traditional VC. We invest in startups and we advise the high growth community, often startups in early stage. Um, we do so more specifically for advisory in the areas of marketing, revenue operations, finance, strategic operations, and product development. So we have a team of about 135 people globally and growing, delivering that support. And then, we are deploying capital as well into some of those startups. And on the investment side, where we stick closer to our thesis, which is B2B SaaS in early stage, so seed, maybe up to Series A. Um, but then on the advisory side, we're really just a group of people that have been through this a few times. and have found that we learn things the hard way, and we're pretty good at trying to advise folks on how they might do things the less hard way. So, very hands on, tactical um, advisory work where we can kind of say, like, hey, here's the goal, here's the strategy, right? But let us roll up our sleeves also to help you get that done. And that's really resonating with the market. So it's been a great few years here. We just started in 2019.
Oh, interesting. And there's a lot of chatter about how the macro of venture investing has changed in the last, 12 months because of the zero interest rate phenomena. What do you see inside?
I mean, it's a bit of the same. Once you're kind of inside and you get down to the macro level or the micro level of any macro trend, you're going to have your own lens and kind of your own version of it. So, um, the macro trends of interest rates, the macro trends of valuations being super super high back in like 2021, and then kind of coming down. A couple of bank failures here in the mix this year. There's a lot of macro trends that are kind of going on, even like geopolitical changes. There's a lot that influences the market. And so we've kind of, from day one, even from the start and before all of those trends really started to hit, um, we've tried to be very differentiated in being pragmatic. So we have a bit of a different model. We're a rolling evergreen syndicate with our investors. So we're not kind of raising a big fund and then deploying it, and then okay, 7 to 10 years, the buzzer strikes, and we get all that capital back and see how we did. And a lot of times hoping for one or two winners, just as power law, to make the fund kind of work. We do a rolling evergreen syndicate. So we're calling capital in equal increments every 6 months, and our investors commit for a minimum of a 5 year period. And what that does is it allows us to steadily be deploying capital. We created this model before kind of all of these wacky macroeconomic and industry trends, but it's actually served us really well. We've always had a mind for founder first, pragmatic growth, and not really playing power law. We'd like to see the majority of our portfolio companies win. And we also define winning as perhaps a much smaller exit than what a traditional VC might say is a win. Um, and that gave us kind of an unexpected, like really unique and advantageous position as the market's done what it's done, because we've been writing checks the whole time, and we've been writing them steadily, and we've always been looking for really healthy companies to invest in. Not to say that you have to be profitable yet, or even be have making steady revenue yet, but we're looking for founders that have product market fit, that have not vanity metrics in mind. They're not just kind of gunning to, make the cover of TechCrunch or whatever it may be. They're trying to build a product that the market needs and the market wants and is willing to pay for, and they're trying to do it really um, pragmatically and carefully and well planned and carefully executed. So now more than ever, out of necessity, we're seeing founders operate businesses that way, right? They can't just kind of chase the next round, chase the vanity metrics, and more is more is more, and it'll all be fine as long as you get your next round raised, because you might not get your next round in this environment. And so we're really finding more founders that we're a better fit with here in this bit of a crazy environment, and we're able to write checks that we really believe in. The companies to do great things with that capital.
I love it because I'm surprised that what York is doing is not a thing. Why this is not mainstream? Why do we chase power law? Why do we chase A, B, C, D, E, F, G round? Why do we agree to this myth that 99% of the startups have to fail?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I mean, I don't agree with it, right? So why do others? I think it depends on who they're serving. So if you're just serving your LPs and trying to return um, like a great MOIC back to your LPs, then the power law might do that. And maybe that's the easiest pathway to get there, right? It's actually really very, very hard and a lot of work to try to help the majority of your portfolio companies win. If you can just kind of cut your losses and double down on your winners and really make sure that you get one over the line, maybe that's a bit easier on the day to day, if that's an okay definition of winning. But that's just not what we see. We're very founder focused. And we do that not by, ditching our LPs or saying, hey, best of luck, you're not our priority here, but we do that rather with aligned incentives. So really aligning with portfolio companies and founders and investment partners that agree with us that a win looks like something that's beneficial for the founder, for the team, and for the investors kind of across the board. Um, and we're super founder focused, and you can kind of see that in our model of how we're delivering advisory services alongside of our checks. um, we want to kind of jump in, roll up our sleeves, and be helpful as boots on the ground, and we're still in it. We're operators helping operators. So um, we believe in our founders and what they're trying to do, and we're ready to kind of step into the mud and dirt with them to help them get where they need to be. And that's often not what a VC firm will do. So I think that's why we're a bit different. We serve a different, maybe quote unquote, customer. And we just think that wins are for everyone, not just the LPs.
I so much agree with this because as a founder, as an entrepreneur, I don't like the spray and pray. I don't like the fact that I am on the borderline of becoming an ugly child that, investor would say, no, you're not winning. So, get out of here, mister,
Yeah,
because I'm going to focus on the other child.
right.
Um, Not fully knowing the fact that I have families to feed, I have
Hmm.
customers to serve. I may not be growing 10% month over month, but happy customers still, right?
Yep.
Is there a name for this investment class, or you mentioned non-traditional venture capital? Is there a name?
Gosh, I don't know. I don't know if there's a name for it. We should coin one, shouldn't we?
Yeah, exactly. I think
Yeah,
we should coin, because that's how traditional businesses were built, not by
yeah,
power law. Like hundreds of small
right.
businesses around us, they're not power law.
Yeah. Pragmatic, founder-focused growth. I mean, that's a long title. I feel like we can workshop that, but that's really that's really what we're trying to do here.
Super awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And you started with York, what, 2.5 years ago?
That's right. Yep.
How did that happen?
Yeah, good timing, a stroke of luck, and a lot of hard work. So, York was founded by our three managing partners and co-founders, Adam Coughlin, Joe Raska, and Kyle York. They all work together at a company called Dynamic Network Services, Inc. That's here out of Manchester. A tremendous company, saw great growth, and eventually had an exit to Oracle. Really successful exit for everybody involved, and that's actually where I met them. So I'm not a co-founder of York IE. I had to kind of wait my turn a bit, and harass them on the sidelines until they were ready for me. But I met Kyle, Joe, and Adam back in 2013, I believe, working at Dine, and that company grew and grew. I mean, it was a tremendous success, and we did all sorts of strategic things. And so I got to work with each of them, and just build really strong relationships. So when they decided to launch York IE in 2019, I was like, great, I'm in. And they're like, well, we kind of like need a little bit of time to get some investment partners and portfolio companies, I don't know, like revenue before we kind of need a finance person. So I was like, okay, dang it. So I had to wait a little bit until they were ready for me. I worked at one company in between on my own, which is a great company too, a great experience that sold to private equity. So that was another great experience to kind of put in my hat. And then joined them 2.5 years ago, when the business was kind of ready to have a CFO in charge. So um, yeah, so a bit of luck and kind of getting that job way back in 2013, and then all the hard work in the 10 years since, kind of proving out that I could do what it takes to run startup finance.
Amazing. And what does your job look like? If I happen to get a peek into your calendar for today, of course, today you have a
Yeah.
T-shirt which says vacay, so that's awesome to see it. You know, and people who are going to listen this on audio, and Janelle has this wonderful T-shirt which has VACAY written on it, and I'm absolutely loving the vibe. So if I happen to peek into your calendar, Janelle, what would it look like?
It's full of all sorts of things. I am never bored, which is why I think I love startup, high growth life because finance can be boring. And it's not boring in this realm, in this industry. So, I wear a few hats as we do in startups. So we have our operating business, which I mentioned has about 135 employees. And so it's all things operational CFO. We have an outsourced accounting team of just bookkeepers, but billing clients, signing contracts, paying invoices, payroll, HR, IT, business operations, all of those things that kind of you think of a traditional CFO. So I do that for our company. And then there's all things finance for the fund itself, so cap calls and financial statement audits, tax reporting, and distributions, and all that fun stuff. But I have the most fun in kind of the third element of my job, which is doing advisory work with our clients. And that includes portfolio clients and non portfolio. So we're serving about 85 clients probably across all of our modules. And I'm lucky enough with my director of FP&A on my team to serve about a dozen of those on corporate strategy and financial planning and analysis. So that's all the really cool things of startup, which is kind of building the puzzle of what's our financial forecast, where do we want to be in 1, 3, 5 years, how the heck are we going to get there, and can we actually pull it off? So as much as people think accounting is math, it's really puzzle making to say, can you achieve your strategic goals and how will everything fit together?
That's amazing to know. I want to go back a little bit. So you got a degree in economics, if I remember your profile, and then all through you have been wearing a CFO hat. Is that the goal? Was that the goal?
Yeah, well, my degree is in accounting with a minor in economics.
Ah,
And I simply did that because I couldn't choose. And so I got down to the wire, and I was like, it was just double major or what. And I had all the credits for econ minor. So there we go. I said, go ahead and write that on the degree. Um, but the idea actually behind that and why I think because a CPA background is kind of common for a CFO, but not always. Like that true accounting doesn't always kind of make its way to that strategic finance position. But I think the economics degree was almost like foreshadowing for that of that puzzle, right? So the idea that I had with that and kind of going for the more in-depth economics courses was how can we make it all work? How can we start to look at trends, right? I loved those graphs. I loved the graphs. Where's it trending? Where's it heading? Is it going to work? And so my idea actually, when I was thinking of majoring in economics, was could I go into companies and tell them what's not working and why it wasn't working and how could they shift what they're doing in order to make it work? Whether that's a price elasticity of demand or who knows from an economics perspective, like this is not working, how can you make it work? And so on the accounting side, I immediately was like, no tax, no thank you for tax. So I worked at a CPA firm because that's just rule following, right? And that's not very much fun. There's not Sure, there's tax strategy, but a lot of the day to day is just kind of figuring out how to follow the rules. So I went when I got the accounting degree. I went to a firm that I could just do audit. That felt like a little bit more of a puzzle for me in getting the CPA license, and that lasted about 4 years because it was just very retrospective. Here's what happened, and I'll tell you what happened, and here's all the rules, and everything's fine, and you kind of move on. I wanted to say like, okay, can I figure out what happened? And then can I use that to figure out what's going to happen? And that's the jumping off point that I found to be more exciting. So I think all these years later, I've kind of found a way to use a bit of the economics and accounting together.
I must say this that you basically are expressing that you have an explorer gene. You love mystery, you love puzzles, and
Yeah,
solve the unknown.
totally. Yeah, and I only this is funny. I only love a mystery that can be solved. So it's almost my younger sister has a degree in philosophy, and so you could say, oh, okay, that's also a mystery, but that doesn't have an answer. You can choose your own adventure, and I can't stand it. I want the mystery, but I want there to be a solution at the end. And in accounting and finance, there's multiple solutions that you could find, but there's something at the end that you can kind of tie a bow on and say, "See, I told you it would work," or whatever. I told you it wouldn't, maybe, in the bad scenario.
You grew up in Manchester, you mentioned earlier, or you live in Manchester right now?
Yeah, Southern New Hampshire area. I did a little bebopping around as like a very young kid, but I grew up around here in New Hampshire. Yeah.
What was early childhood like?
Um, I was born in Massachusetts, and then my parents actually both went back to college. They went to Pennsylvania, so we lived in like family college apartment dorms. That was a cool. I was young, right? So, but I remember thinking like, oh, this is the coolest place to be. I live at college, and I'm just an elementary school kid.
And were you this exploratory in your high school, in your middle school, or it got imbibed as you lived through the college days?
I think I was a late bloomer with this stuff. Yeah, in middle school and high school, I was distracted by fitting in with the pack. Um, I got a job early. I did, some early indications that I would be a good accountant. My extracurricular activity of choice were student council and then managing the baseball team and keeping the books throughout the game.
Like a
So.
treasurer managing the money as well?
No, like the plays, right? So
Oh,
you
like
get
the
the lineup.
plays.
Yeah, yeah, and you got to do the strikeouts and were they looking or not looking for a forward or backward K and recording errors and like, keeping the track of the game plays, which I loved. So I think in I think in college I realized I was a bit onto something, where I didn't just have to follow. I've always been a rule follower. And I thought, like the gold stars, that's the way to succeed. And so I was always good at that, straight A's, student council, whatever I was going to do, band, chorus. And then in college, it was like, ooh, but you can like kind of go the next step. Like you can check the box and then use that as a basis for more. Um, and so that's when I kind of got a little bit more creative in what I was doing and stepping outside the box a little bit more. Um, for, I don't know, thought leadership or whatever it may be.
This is very interesting and in sharp contrast because use that as a basis, but you mentioned something about taxation. You don't want to do taxation because that's rule following. So do whatever is necessary as a foundational baseline, and then of course don't follow those rules at all.
Yeah, well then it's like now you have options, right? You
Yeah.
kind of have to check that box of getting the basis. Like when I talk to my clients, I'm like the first thing before we can start any of this like really cool forecasting, are your books accurate? Can you tell me how many clients you have and how much they're paying and when did they come on board? Can you tell me who owes you money, how much they owe you and when it's due? Can you tell me what have you been spending money on? A lot of times, like cost classification is like a first start, right? They'll be like, well, I have salary. I'm like, okay, well, who are you paying and how much? And they'll just give me a list of names. I'm like, but what are they working on? How much are you spending on cost of revenue versus selling and marketing versus G&A, R&D, and so on? And so the very first thing before you can have any fun, it's almost like, you got to eat your dinner before you can have dessert. Like you got to get all of that in place. And so like how quickly can we knock that out and get a really good set of data? Follow all the rules, get all the numbers right. And then what can we do with it? And that's the exciting part.
Has accounting evolved or still very grunt workish, very manual?
Oh, it's evolved for sure. And I think the continued evolution we're going to see even in the next few years with AI is going to be tremendous because all these things I'm talking about with kind of the fun stuff after all the data, we finally have time for it. Before we had these systems and automation, and this introduction of AI that's kind of been around quietly for a while, but now it's really getting the spotlight. Um, you would have to spend most of your time getting the numbers right, reconciling things and posting and the boring stuff. And if you wanted to have any time left over, you either had to hire a big team to get the boring stuff out of the way, or not sleep. So now the faster we can get that stuff out of the way, the more time we can spend on this strategic, and the software development over the past several years has been tremendous in enabling us to do that.
Yeah, I was reading somewhere, probably a LinkedIn post, and the author wrote that audit would be the first one to be written off, or first one to go thanks to AI. It'll be all automated. You don't need humans anymore. Is that just a projection, or is that going to happen really?
I don't think we're going to eliminate humans from any of it because it can all be nuanced and software is only going to take you so far. I think that audit might evolve, especially like in its efficacy of what's an audit really doing, what's it really telling us, how much time, if we can get the system to do all the checks, right? So when I was in audit back in 2009ish, um, I would say, okay, your control is that a journal entry is signed off on by the manager before it's posted. They would have a cabinet full of paper journal entries and a pen and paper signature of the manager approving it. And I would spend my day, okay, here's my 13 entries that I picked, and can you show me the signature on the 13 entries? That's not really helping anybody, right? And even the fact that throughout the year they have to get the signature from the manager to post the entry is like, what a pest. So if we automate something like that example in accounting, where I can just pull a report that every time that an entry had to go, I can see that the manager clicked it, I can get that done in 10 minutes. Now, what else can I do with my time? If nothing else, I could possibly lower my audit fees and fit more audits in the year with the same number of staff, and not have had to work the 80 hours a week that I had to work during busy season. So I don't think it's going to replace the people. I think it's going to replace all of the tedious tasks that they had to do and actually spend allow them to be spending their time on some meaningful, why did we have that manager sign off on everything? What are we looking for? Can we work on training for, the staff, or whatever it may be? There's much better fish to fry than looking at handwritten signatures on pieces of paper.
I'm old enough to remember taping receipts on a blank piece of paper and then scanning them, sending the PDF, but also sending the physical copies in a manila envelope.
I know, just in case, right? I would have a drawer of these receipts. I'm like, I don't want these things. So yeah, I'm very happy for the automation across the board. I think if we use it wisely, people will just like their jobs better, be more productive.
As we come towards the end of our conversation, Janelle, all of us thrive on the energy and inspiration of other people around us. Did you have any mentors growing up or in your career?
Oh yeah, for sure. It's funny. I'm always on the lookout for mentors, and 99% of the folks that have mentored me might not have known it. So, of course, we learn things. My mother is a CPA, and a leader, a finance leader. So, and she actually went back to college for her accounting degree when I was 12, and she had 3 kids, was doing night school, working full time, and trying to go back to school. So, um, since then, she's just kind of. I've always looked at her to kind of say like, you can do it all. I'm going to put that in air quotes for anybody that's listening on audio, because you can't do it all, but you can make some really strategic choices to do a lot of things. And actually, you can be capable of a lot more than you might think at first glance. And I learned that from her. She also told me when I was in college, this is why I think I noodled on economics for so long, don't do accounting. It's such a pain. And then I took accounting courses and I was like, I really like them. I think I'm going to do it. So that was kind of funny. But yeah, I mean, I have mentors all over the place. I think that we should always be learning, and learning from everybody. Everybody has something to teach us, whether it's for the positive, oh, that looks great, I should do that, or the negative, like that is a bad look, I don't want to be doing that. Um, so I mean, obviously, I've looked to a lot of women in business. It's not the easiest place to be. A woman in technology, a woman in, VC is. Um, it's getting better, but it's not always been the best industry to be a part of. And so looking at women that have gone before me, and kind of saying like, okay, well, how have they done it? Are they, have they pulled it off? If she can do it, why can't I? And sometimes asking for a lunch meeting to pick their brain about it, and sometimes just quietly observing and taking in lessons that I could apply. So yeah, I have everybody around me as a mentor in one way or the other, and hopefully will continue to be.
Thanks for sharing that. And we'll give a shout out to your mom. And I absolutely love that line you mentioned, that you don't realize how much impact you have made on a person's life because you never came into a hey mentor-mentee relationship, but you met someone for 20 minutes and the words of wisdom lives with you forever.
Totally. And now in the world of podcasts, Glennon Doyle is a mentor of mine. I will never meet her, but I love her podcast and I listen to it and I take it to heart. So sky's the limit there.
Any book that has influenced your life?
I pretty much will consume anything Brené Brown. I think that she is tremendously helpful as a balance of pragmatic, um, business leader, and also a lot of her study, because she's a social scientist, is around vulnerability and bringing that into the workplace. And I think for a while, I kind of thought like, okay, if I'm going to be in business, then that means like shoulders back, got to be tough and kind of go in and like this is how we do business, right? And that's just not how it is. There's a humanness to us that's actually incredibly valuable to bring our whole self to business. And Brene talks about that a lot in her research on vulnerability and what it's like to kind of be a human. And that's been tremendously helpful for me. Like we're always so busy, right? So to also have to wear a suit of armor in the morning and kind of stack that on the list of things to do was like double exhausting. So I love her work and kind of saying, don't do that. You can be your authentic self, and do business in a way that suits your personality and is who you are, and not kind of this show. So I loved her book, Dare to Lead. Was probably my favorite one that I've read, but all of her work I think is really insightful.
I've not read that one, but heard reviews about in her writing, and of course the topic of vulnerability is a big one. I think it's slowly becoming mainstream where leaders in the industry have started walking around without that armor being on all the time and making themselves accessible, well connected, open door policies. We see examples in the industry, of course. So thank you for sharing that. And as we conclude our conversation, Janelle, thank you for coming on the show. Where can people find you?
Yeah, I am on LinkedIn is my favorite. So you can find me there, Janelle Gorman. Just search me. There aren't too many Janelle Gormans in the world, so you should find me at York IE. I'm also on Twitter, although a little boring feed there. But yeah, we have a blog post at York IE. York IE has a platform for advisory, service delivery, kind of self service, and also a research platform. So a lot of my work is on there in terms of templates or blog writing or even some lectures that I've done and posted up there. So you can find some of my stuff at fuel.york.ie as well.
Thank you so much, Janelle, and thanks for coming on the show. Absolutely loved the venture capital conversation. We should do one more round. It's just on that topic.
I'd love to. Happy to talk anytime.
That's Janelle Gorman from York IE. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Chief Future Officer podcast. The Chief Future Officer podcast is brought to you by Quolum, a CFO's best buddy to buy and manage SaaS. To support this podcast, please like, share, and subscribe to us on your preferred podcast application. Links to previous episodes and the rest of the show notes are in the bio, and I'd love to have you check out other episodes. Lastly, if you want to be on this podcast or recommend a friend, let us know in the comments below. Thank you.